These are the 7 levels of cabins in Percy Jackson. Level 1, the Forgotten Cabins. These are the boring ones. Not boring like safe, boring like invisible, which is exactly how a war starts, full of kids who got claimed, found their bunk, and spent the summer wondering why their godly parent couldn't have been someone cooler. Hypnos' cabin is the poster child, god of sleep. The cabin is always quiet because half the campers are unconscious at any given moment. Their main contribution to the Battle of Manhattan was showing up. Clovis, the head counselor, fell asleep during a war council. Nobody woke him up. That's Hypnos' cabin in a nutshell. Iris' cabin gets a little more interesting because Iris is the goddess of the rainbow, which sounds amazing, until you realize the actual power here is sending holographic messages, useful for communication, not useful when a titan is standing on your doorstep. Nemesis' cabin exists to balance the scales of revenge, which sounds terrifying until you meet Ethan Nakamura, who sacrificed his eye for power and still ended up working for Kronos. The goddess of revenge raised a kid who got betrayed by the person he was working for. Even Nemesis can't catch a break. The detail that actually matters, Ethan Nakamura was the one who broke the oath of the minor gods during the Battle of Manhattan. The oath that every minor god's child had sworn to fight for Kronos. When he switched sides at the critical moment and tried to destroy Kronos himself, it cost him his life. A forgotten kid from a forgotten cabin almost ended the war single-handedly. Almost. The Nemesis cabin doesn't win, but it has a habit of showing up at exactly the wrong moment for everyone else. These cabins matter because they prove Camp Half-Blood could have been a perfectly normal summer camp if the gods had just stuck to having boring children. They didn't, and that's everyone's problem now. The Forgotten Cabins started a war. Level 2 is where the real power starts hiding in plain sight. Level 2, the Utility Cabins. This tier doesn't get respect, it also doesn't need it. Hephaestus' cabin produces the kids who win wars without anyone noticing. Charles Beckendorf, head counselor, the guy who sacrificed himself to blow up Kronos' cruise ship at the start of The Last Olympian, was a Hephaestus kid. Leo Valdez built a flying warship in his spare time. A flying warship with cannons. At 15, the Hephaestus cabin doesn't show up to fight. It shows up having already built the thing that ends the fight. Hecate cabin barely exists in the original series, but by the heroes of Olympus, it becomes clear that Hecate's children are playing a completely different game. Magic, crossroads, the mist that stops mortals from seeing the truth. Hecate controls the wall between the human world and the divine world. Her kids can rewrite reality at the edges. They just don't make a lot of noise about it. Hazel Levesque, technically a child of Pluto, not Hecate, but trained in mist manipulation, can make people see things that aren't there and miss things that are. She used it to hide an entire warship from enemy forces. Lou Ellen, a Hecate kid who appears in the short stories, shows how dangerous Hecate's children can be when magic gets involved. The Hecate cabin doesn't overpower its enemies, it makes them question what's real. That's a different kind of dangerous entirely. Tyche cabin is luck, literally luck. In a world where prophecies determine outcomes and the fates hold every thread, having a child of the goddess of fortune in your corner is either completely useless or absolutely broken. Nobody's figured out which one yet. The Tyche cabin kids aren't sure either. They just keep winning things and looking confused about it. The utility cabins are the ones you want on your side when everything goes wrong. Level 3 is what you're up against when they're not. And if you think Hecate belongs higher on this list, the comments are open because that argument is worth having. Level 3, the combat cabins. These cabins have a very specific skill set. That skill set is violence. They are very good at it. Ares' cabin is the obvious one. They're aggressive, they're organized, and they have an almost supernatural ability to be annoying about it. Clarice LaRue, head counselor, spent most of the original series being the person Percy wished was on his side instead of in his way. In the Sea of Monsters, she actually completes the quest she was assigned, succeeds at the mission, and then gets undercut by Percy saving the day anyway. The Ares cabin did everything right and still didn't get credit. They've been angry about it for 3 books, But Clarice gets her moment. In The Last Olympian, she charges into battle against a titan, not a monster, not a demigod, a titan, with an electric spear and the kind of confidence that only comes from genuinely not thinking about the consequences. She doesn't win, but she doesn't run either. If you want to understand the Ares cabin, that's your answer right there. Apollo cabin is more dangerous than it looks, which is a problem because it looks extremely dangerous. Every Apollo kid is a trained archer. They can also write poetry, which is less useful in battle but more useful for morale, which Riordan treats as basically the same thing. Will Solace, the head counselor by The Last Olympian, spends the entire battle keeping people alive in the infirmary. An Apollo kid who isn't fighting is still the reason your fighters are still standing. Both cabins have the same problem though. Ares cabin in a straight fight, terrifying. Ares cabin in a situation that requires strategy or diplomacy. They once started an argument about flag placement that nearly ended capture the flag before it began. Apollo cabin from a distance? Devastating. Apollo cabin in close quarters, they'll write a very moving poem about what happened to them. The combat cabins are powerful, they're just not flexible. Level 4 is where that changes. Level 4, the legacy cabins. This is where most rankings go wrong. People sort by raw power and miss the cabins where the legacy of the parent matters more than the powers of the kids. Athena cabin shouldn't work as well as it does. Athena never had relationships, never had children the normal way. Her kids spring from her mind, essentially, pure intellect given human form, which means every single Athena kid is wired differently to every other demigod at camp. They don't just think faster, they think in patterns nobody else can see. Structural, strategic, the kind of thinking that looks at a battlefield and immediately identifies the three things everyone else missed. When Annabeth is gone during the House of Hades, Malcolm steps up as acting counselor and holds the cabin together through a war, a leadership gap, and the weight of not knowing if his friend is even alive. He does it quietly and gets no credit for it. That's an Athena kid. Annabeth Chase is the argument for this entire tier. She designed the architecture of Olympus. She navigated Tartarus. She talked Percy into not starting a second war at least 3 separate times. Her power isn't throwing lightning or controlling water. It's being the smartest person in the room and making sure the room survives long enough for that to matter. In the TV show, the Athena cabin immediately reads as the cabin that's been quietly running everything while everyone else was distracted arguing. That tracks. The Artemis cabin is a special case because it's technically not a cabin. It's a tent because Artemis and her hunters don't do permanent structures. They move, they hunt, they don't stay. But the hunters of Artemis, an eternal band of girls who swore off romance to follow the goddess of the hunt, are some of the most battle-hardened fighters in the entire series. They've been doing this since ancient Greece. Your average camper has been doing this since last summer. The legacy cabins prove the point the series keeps making. Where you come from matters less than what you do with it. None of them, though, come close to what happens when the big three get involved. Level 5, the big three cabins. There's a reason Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades made a pact after World War II to stop having children. It wasn't guilt, it was fear. Their kids were so powerful that the gods decided the safest move was to stop making them. Zeus and Poseidon broke the pact. Hades became the loophole. Every single one of them looked at an oath sworn on the river Styx, the most binding oath a divine being can make, the one with consequences nobody wants to find out about, and found a way around it anyway. That tells you everything about the big three cabins. Even the gods couldn't stay away from producing them. Zeus cabin, cabin 1, sits at the top of the hill, biggest and most impressive, exactly as Zeus intended. Thalia Grace, daughter of Zeus, was so powerful that when she died at age 15, she got turned into a pine tree to preserve her life force, and the tree became the magical barrier protecting the entire camp. She was more useful as a tree than most demigods are alive. When she came back to life in the Sea of Monsters, she immediately became one of the most powerful fighters in camp. Nobody was surprised. And then there's Jason Grace, son of Jupiter, the Roman aspect of Zeus, who spent years leading an entire separate camp of demigods on the other side of the country without anyone at Camp Half-Blood knowing he existed. Zeus didn't just break the pact once, he broke it twice on 2 continents and produced a leader each time. The sky is the domain of kings. The Zeus cabin makes sure you don't forget it. Ask any camper which cabin they'd least want to fight, and 9 out of 10 say cabin 3. Poseidon's cabin has exactly 1 documented camper in the modern era, Percy Jackson. 1 kid, that's it. The most powerful cabin in the original series had a single occupant who slept there alone for years. Percy's powers include controlling hurricanes, breathing underwater, surviving depths that would crush a submarine, and an ability to communicate with horses that is genuinely underrated as a tactical advantage. And then in the last Olympian, he takes the curse of Achilles, bathing in the river Styx to make himself nearly invincible, with 1 fatal weak point. A kid who was already one of the most powerful demigods alive made himself almost impossible to kill for the duration of the most important battle in modern history. 1 kid, 1 cabin, nearly ended the world twice and saved it 3 times. Nobody wanted to build cabin 13. Hades was supposed to be banned. The deal was clear. And yet there it sits at the edge of camp away from everything else because Nico showed up and refused to be ignored. More on that at level 7. The big 3 cabins are the ceiling of what anyone at camp expects, and they're still not the most powerful cabin in the series. Level 6, cabin 11. This is the cabin that actually ran Camp Half-Blood. Not Zeus, not Poseidon. Hermes' cabin, cabin 11, is the most packed cabin at Camp Half-Blood by a long way. Every unclaimed demigod ends up there. Every runaway kid who stumbles through the camp border and doesn't know who their divine parent is gets pointed at cabin 11 and told to find a bunk. It is permanently overcrowded. It smells. The bunk assignments are a diplomatic crisis that gets renegotiated every week. It also produced Luke Castellan, head counselor of Cabin 11, son of Hermes, the most gifted swordsman of his generation, spent years watching unclaimed children pile into his cabin and drawing exactly the right conclusions about what that meant. The gods didn't care. They had children across the world and couldn't be bothered to acknowledge them. The claiming system was broken. The minor gods had no cabins. The forgotten kids had nowhere to go. Luke didn't just get angry about it, he organized, he recruited, he built an army out of every resentful, unclaimed, overlooked camper he could find and handed it to Kronos on a silver platter. The entire first war, 5 books, Manhattan, Olympus, all of it, started because the head counselor of Cabin 11 looked at how camp was run and decided it deserved to burn. And he wasn't wrong about the problem. That's what makes it worse. Ethan Nakamura, the kid from level 1, the one who sacrificed his eye for power, ended up in Luke's army because his mother Nemesis had no cabin, no acknowledgement, no place at camp. The war that nearly destroyed Olympus was fueled by kids the system forgot. Cabin 11 just gave them somewhere to sleep while they planned. In the TV show, Luke's cabin is portrayed with exactly the right energy. Crowded, chaotic, buzzing with kids who have nowhere else to go, and a counselor who is paying very close attention to all of them. You can see it happening in real time. You can see why it happens. Cabin 11 didn't start a war because it was the most powerful. It started a war because it was where the Forgotten Ones went, and the Forgotten Ones had a lot to say. But even Cabin 11 isn't the most powerful cabin in the series. That title belongs to the one that wasn't supposed to exist at all. Level 7, Cabin 13. Every level has been building to this, and the answer isn't Zeus. It isn't Poseidon. It's a cabin the gods tried to make sure would never exist. After World War II, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades swore on the river Styx that they would have no more children. The oath was absolute, no exceptions, no loopholes. The big 3 cabins were supposed to be empty from that point forward. Thalia Grace was an accident that nearly killed everyone. Percy Jackson was another one. That should have been it. And then Nico walked out of the Lotus Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas looking like he just stepped out of 1943 because he had, and everything changed. Nico and his sister Bianca were children of Hades, hidden in a place where time doesn't move since before the oath was sworn. The gods argued about whether that counted as breaking the rules. Hades didn't particularly care what they thought. Bianca died on her first quest. Nico survived. And what Nico D'Angelo did with his survival is the reason Cabin 13 sits at the top of this list. For years, he was the only person in it. He ate alone. He trained alone. Every other cabin had a community, a counselor, a history. Cabin 13 had Nico and 4 walls and the ghosts he could hear through them. The most powerful cabin at Camp Half-Blood was also the loneliest place there. He had no support, no guide, nobody who'd been through it. He figured it out alone in a cabin that wasn't supposed to exist. He can communicate with the dead. He can shadow travel, teleporting through shadows anywhere on Earth, including into places that should be impossible to access. He walked into and out of Tartarus voluntarily, which is something no living being is supposed to be able to do. He raised an army of skeletal warriors during the Battle of Manhattan and changed the outcome of the war. He later becomes the most important person in the House of Hades, guiding Percy and Annabeth's survival and holding together alliances that should have collapsed without him. Cabin 13 was never supposed to be built. Hades was banned. The oath was absolute. And the cabin exists anyway because the rules of gods bend when children refuse to disappear. That's what makes this the real level 7. It's not Nico's powers, it's what Cabin 13 represents. Every other cabin at Camp Half-Blood was built because a god decided to claim a child. Cabin 13 exists because a child refused to be ignored. That's not the same thing. And in this series, that difference is everything. The gods built 20 cabins. The most powerful one wasn't built by a god. It was claimed by a kid who had every reason not to be there and showed up anyway. That's the whole series in one sentence. If you think another cabin deserves the top spot, make the case in the comments. The cabins are ranked. Now find out what even the gods fear. The 7 levels of gods in Percy Jackson is on screen now.